All right, I would like to call the meeting to order for the Nisswa Planning Commission Board of Adjustment for Tuesday, December 6, 2022. Roll call, please. Jesse Zahn,
Sean Weldon.
Josh Young,
Gary Harris.
Dave Reese.
Maggie Wentler. Bethany Soderlund.
are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No.
Being none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Next, to approve the meeting minutes for November 1st, 2022. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes?
None.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Next item is an open forum. Is there anyone present tonight that would like to speak towards something not on the agenda this evening? Okay. Moving on to public hearings, I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So move.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. All right, first item is conditional use permit application 032-22 for the construction of a 12,000 square foot addition to the existing structure located in the Highway Business District. The subject property is located at 23624 Smiley Road, PID 282-30506, owner applicant DH Docks and Tracks, Mike Morgan. Is the owner applicant present? Come to the front, state your name. You can go to the podium or the desk, whatever you feel. Okay. Evening.
There we go. Mike Morgan.
Yeah, Bethany, your staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to construct an addition to an existing business at DH Docks and Tracks within the Highway Business Zoning District. The use of this 12,000 square foot addition would be for unheated storage. Recommended conditions include the presented stormwater buffers and basins along with long-term permanent stormwater features to prevent stormwater from being directed to the road right of way or neighboring parcels.
If you'd like to make a public comment regarding the project, please step towards the podium and state your name and address. Or the desk, I guess, in this case. Hearing none, I'll close public comments.
Okay.
Yeah. Do we have a public comment?
Yes, I have some questions.
Okay, well, if you want to come up.
How we doing, Wally?
Yeah, podium. Why don't we go behind the podium so we can hear you?
My name is Wally Shear. I'm the owner of Brainerd Lakes Dock and Lift, which adjoins the Mike's property. And I'm not here to argue it or fight it or anything. I just want to make sure that the city does to Mike what they did to me, which isn't bad. But we have a water problem. And when there's any kind of a rain at all, my property is a little lower than theirs. And it runs off the back. And it floods me out. I mean, I have to hook up something to get it so that we can use it. And it doesn't take very much. And Mike may not even be aware of it in that I haven't complained to anybody about it, but it's gotten to the point where my guys are upset that they have to go out and clean it up after every rainfall. And so I had to do when we built, we had to give a plan with a system already there for the water. And we've never had water leave our land at all, ever, since we've been there. So I just wanted to make it's really important to us that it be taken care of.
Okay.
That's all I care about.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
If I could take a moment to just address those concerns as far as stormwaters. The presented plan does include basins and buffers, but with all commercial properties in the city of Nisswa, stormwater plan is required. And stormwater by default cannot be directed to neighboring parcels, can't be directed to road right of ways or in public water. So this is something that we would work with the applicant during the land use permit portion to ensure that he continues to do things to mitigate stormwater running off into neighboring parcels and in the road right of ways as well.
David, can you follow up with some of the water retention plan?
Sure. So for our review, and we're the city engineer representing the city. We reviewed the grading, erosion control and drainage plan that was submitted with the application. It provides for calculations of the runoff for the city's regulated storm event to handle that runoff from impervious coverage, directed to stormwater holding areas on property that's there. And so with that review, this appears to be addressing those concerns. And as Bethany said, through the permitting process that will be followed through with.
I don't have any problem with building, but doing all that, but letting me out is a big deal.
And your property again is which direction from this property?
There's plenty of roads down south side, go south. We're kind of right.
Okay,
So I'm ready to.
okay. There is a low area in that southeast corner of the property. Yeah. Everybody could see from the contours on the plans that were submitted. And there's a retention area that they're directing the runoff from the building and from the property. That's just prior to that low area, so it allows it to infiltrate. And then ultimately it would still go to the low area. In that corner.
I'll say that we built our building, we were very cognizant of all of that. And so I just feel that, and it's probably in the making, but it is a big issue to us.
Okay, Mike, do you want to just give us a brief overview of what
Sure.
what the plan is?
So we're just running out of space. That's all there is to it. And we're looking at different options of what we wanted to do. And this is what we decided with. It's gonna be cold storage with a cement floor. Basic, very, very basic, just for storing dock components that we make throughout the year. Anything that we make during the winter months, we try to keep it inside just so when we give it to the customer, it's brand new. There's not water marks, salt marks, what be it. So sticking it on the cement pad has worked in the past, but we're just running out of space. The long and the short of it, just trying to get stuff inside, protect it. The pond. So this is gonna be on the north, the building is gonna run north and south, connect to the existing building. Wally's on the opposite end of that, and there's that little holding pond that we're gonna have to put in. And on top of that, we have that giant hole there where I think a lot of the water will run up to too, so.
My main concern is that line along the south border.
Nothing's gonna change anywhere near there within 100 yards. Yep. Nope, yep, it's gonna be in the northeast corner of the property. As far from your spot as we can get.
Okay, Jesse, do you have any questions?
I don't think I do. It's pretty straightforward and
We're gonna keep it, well, the goal is to match current, to make it look similar to what we have now, so.
Yep.
We wanna make it look nice, so.
Sure you don't want to put heat in there. Aluminum's always nicer to touch.
Yeah, yeah. It probably cost a hell of a lot to heat it during the winter months.
Once you start fabricating it,
There we go.
it heats up pretty quick.
There you go.
I'm a TIG welder myself.
Okay.
Sean, did you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Gary?
No, none at all. I was looking at the drainage calculations. Probably more complete than we usually see for something the size of the project, so.
I would agree. Just one thing to confirm, you pretty well confirmed it, that this is cold storage space,
Cold storage space. That's it.
not creating any additional water usage or wastewater for the site, so really no change in your existing wastewater.
I can't see any
System.
change in it.
Okay. Our other comment was that the city did complete a study here in the last year or so. For servicing this entire area with sewer and water. So I think are you aware of that?
I'm aware. I haven't had any, either way. Bethany did bring it to my attention that that might
Okay.
be a possibility, but as far as definitely, defined, no, I have not heard a yes or a no that that's gonna be required.
Okay. It's at this stage, all we can do is point it out to you so you're aware of it. It's conceptual in nature. It's to provide a route for servicing the area, and that route would currently lie in concept off to the east side of your property. So in our estimation, it would look like it'd be feasible for you to connect at some point in the future, should that project be constructed. So.
That's so like, we're agreeing to, we have to connect, even though this, let's say that's not done for a few years, because it hasn't been started, to my knowledge. City-
Right.
So let's explain that to me, just so I'm aware, I guess, timeline wise.
If a project is constructed that makes city sewer and water available to a property, the city's ordinance would require adjacent properties to connect to city utilities.
I'm aware, not super thrilled about it, but aware. We do fill that pond for all of our displays throughout the year. And I don't know if that would change. We pump a lot of water into it just to keep it up. It's amazing how much water you have to pump into that thing. So I hope that wouldn't be an issue. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a study, it's a concept. No final plans or funding have been set up for the construction. So we can't really say with certainty what the schedule for that would be. So.
Trying to get some funding
Preliminary.
for it.
Pardon me?
Trying to get some funding for it.
Right, yep. Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move, the, planning and zoning. Approve the amendment application of 033-22. For the construction of a 12,000 square foot addition to the existing structure located in the Highway Business District. Located at 23,624 Smiley Road. And that'll all be according to the findings of fact by the city staff and their staff report. And all of the recommendations that are attached there too.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Next item is zoning map amendment application 033-22 to rezone parcel 281406663 from open space residential to highway business. The subject property is located on Commons Drive, owner Carrie Rosinski and Tom Briggs, applicant Ken Marthaler.
Good evening. Kent Marthaler.
Bethany, your staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is requesting an amendment to rezone parcel 28140663, currently located off of Commons Drive, from open space residential to highway business. An earlier request in 2017 was denied based on conservation principles outlined in the future land use map in our comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan adopted in 2019 detailed that the future land use map was to be updated within 12 months. That update was never completed, but since then, the city sewer has expanded, resulting in zoning changes to the west of the subject parcel, and a backage road has been proposed, making this parcel not suited for residential development and more in keeping with the purpose and the intent of the highway business zoning designation as outlined in section 2044. City staff supports this rezone and recommends that the planning commission recommend approval of the zoning map amendment to the city council.
If you would like to make public comment regarding this project, please step towards the desk and state your name and address.
Oh, no, right now, right in the front of the base.
There we go.
There you
Carol Johnson, and I am a resident of the Cove, which backs up to this property. And as a resident of the Cove, I guess I just want to maybe ask some questions or express our concerns. One of the concerns that we have is the part of the property that backs right up to the Cove, the residential area of the Cove, is a wetland wildlife area. So we're very concerned about that and the loss of that if that is filled in. We're also very concerned about drainage there, about any lighting, if it's going to be a business, and how that, you know, comes into the residential area of the Cove, any lighting that's, you know, obtrusive. Also any noise, if this is going to become a highway business, you know, area. Obviously, all of the houses in the Cove residential area would be very affected by any noise or anything that would happen in that. So I don't know what's planned for this lot, but those are definitely some very strong concerns that we have from the Cove.
Thank you.
Woody Hecker, resident of the Cove. I would agree with everything Carol has outlined. I would ask the, what was your name?
Kent Marthaler, Kent.
I would ask what you intend to do with this property.
Well, currently it would be for personal holding. Personal holding for potentially a personal shop that we run business through. Might be a potential for maybe doing a plat potentially in the future, but I don't have any plans specifically right now for the parcel, other than the rezoning and then for potential for a personal shop. But the question about the adjoining property to the Cove, just by way of wetland and whatnot, that any of that property back there against that adjacent property would not be buildable, and would be left as is, as I see it.
You would not intend to fill in the wetlands?
No, I would not.
Okay, there's no guarantee of that. That's simply a current opinion.
Well, right, but I can tell you right now that the permitting and the costs and the ability to fill in that wetland would be, it's not of interest of mine.
The wetlands that are currently located on that parcel are protected by the Wetland Conservation Act, and there would be no filling, no impacts to that wetland without some approved process that would be approved through the Wetland Conservation Act. I don't think anybody at this point would be willing to go through what it would take to get any permission to do that.
You're saying they can't fill that in?
Per the Wetland Conservation Act, no, they cannot.
Okay, that's a significant area of this property, so you're gonna lose the use of that, but that's not.
Correct.
That's not a concern.
Not of mine, no.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Woody.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, I'll close public comments. Can you just wanna, can you kind of touch base on it, so, I think we got everything there. Did you have anything else to add?
Not really. I mean, unless you have some more questions.
Okay.
You know.
I guess my first question is, I'm not sure if, I didn't look on the application if that was the case, but has the wetland been delineated on this parcel previously or currently?
Not that I'm aware of.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have.
Oh, Ray, you come up here.
We gotta get you on the record.
Generally speaking, it's 3 years because wetlands change. I mean, they're not always going to be the same. So usually if there's going to be any kind of project, if it's going to be close, there's a requirement for a wetland delineation. Do you have something to add?
Ray Rosinski, husband of the current owner. Yes, there's been multiple aspects of that property. And yes, all of the wetlands that are currently there have essentially not changed, and that's all been, even as far as the city is concerned, how much, none of that can be developed or anything like that. So, and the actual amount of acreage, is actually on the plot of how much is wetlands and everything. So yes, nothing can be done with it. And to my knowledge, no one's never attempted or had any interest in doing anything with it.
Thank you. Jesse, do you have any questions?
No, but perhaps just a remark in regards to potential confusion among the public. Just in the timeline of this whole project, it's been announced for this Backage Road from 77 to Roy Lake, Lower Roy Lake Road. It's definitely going to pose a lot of unknown variables, and then how long since it's been announced to where we're at now to where a question mark as to where we're going to be in the future. You know, people have to make decisions around what they're going to do with their property when it comes to this Backage Road, because truly this is going to be a significant impact. Obviously, of whether property is going to be acquired via eminent domain or all the way to purchasing from the city, et cetera. Then the right of way that was established about a year ago, I believe. I know, some of these individual landowners that would be affected by this, and I think that the concern and the sentiment is pretty consistent. And I would stress that as we have a new council coming on at the start of this upcoming calendar year, that we make it a priority, Bethany, to try to see what we can do. And just to give the public an update, Jenny Mack, city administrator, and I were able to meet with the governor's office on Thursday of this past week. Their head of infrastructure gave us some good input as to what additional funds are out there to be able to get, not just for this Backage Road project, but additional city sewer, city water expansion projects to try to lock things down so we can give the public a more concrete answer as to what the direction is. So there's no confusion, there's no question marks. Try to be as transparent as possible. So rezoning requests such as this, splitting of lots, people are probably waiting to see what's going to be happening, and the longer that we're indecisive, it's going to potentially cause more confusion. So that's my 2 cents.
Sean,
No questions.
Gary?
No, I don't have any questions. I think with just a statement of fact, this Backage Road coming through this property, it makes sense that this property become business, commercial and business zone. So I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to keep it the way it is.
And it's probably not gonna be the last.
Yeah, yeah. So, no, I have no questions other than that.
Bethany, can you touch on some of the ordinance? There was some questions about lighting. Can you kind of touch on some of the concerns for lighting and noise?
Lighting and noise would be governed by the commercial portion of our ordinance that would regulate what could be done on a commercial property in regards to lighting and noise, and all of those considerations would be factored in at the time of development. So if this is rezoned to a commercial parcel, that would be subject to our ordinance, and it would be subject to commercial standards in our ordinance.
If the applicant were to come back and propose something, what is the process so they're aware?
They would need to get a conditional use permit for development on that parcel. So it would be subject to another public hearing.
Sure. Yeah, so we want to hear you. We can hear you, but the microphone and an online feed might not be able to.
So just a quick question. So, and maybe this is a dumb question, I don't know, but are there different rules for commercial property that butts up against residential than commercial next to commercial? Follow what I'm saying?
There are different standards as far as screening, vegetative screening, as far as making sure that there are buffers that are met. And so
Okay.
there are increased setbacks usually, depending on what they decide to do or what kind of development. We would take all of that into consideration.
Okay.
The
there
fact
are
that there
different-
is a wetland there, it's about it's just a little over 9 acres of wetlands, and that would all be factored in as well. There are additional setbacks in regards to that.
Okay, that was my
Mhm.
next question is the amount of acres, if you knew that, what's the wetlands versus what's buildable for you? So it's
Yeah.
9 acres of wetland?
I believe it's a 9.5 acres. And then that's just the portion on the east. If you do look, the plan for the Backage Road is on the screen.
Yep.
And so you can kind of see that that definitely splits that portion. So that would give you increased setbacks as well with the road right of way and everything else in there.
Okay,
And any development road wise that the city would do would be subject to heavy regulation as far as the impacts that that would have on that wetland.
okay. Thank you very
Yep.
much.
Also, in the findings of fact, there are criteria that our ordinance specifically puts out that we have to answer certain questions for a rezone. They're numbers 6 through 20 in the findings of fact. If you have any questions about those and those answers that I provided, please let me know.
And depending on what the proposal is, the planning commission can add other conditions to take into special considerations for commercial next to
Absolutely.
residential.
Yep, absolutely. Mhm.
Okay. No additional comments. I will entertain a motion.
I would move that we recommend to the Nisswa City Council that they approve the zoning map amendment application 033-22 to rezone the parcel number 40663 from open space residential OSR to highway business HB. And it's all according to the finding of the planner's report and the findings of fact that are listed in numbering 20.
I'll second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries.
We can't put conditions on zoning, right?
Conditions are not allowed on a rezone.
Okay.
Next item is a variance application 034-22 to allow for the construction of an accessory structure on a parcel without primary dwelling within the shoreline residential zoning district, and to request a variance of a 15-foot side yard and 20-foot rear lot setbacks where 30 feet is required. The subject property is located on Maple Lane, PID 283-40562. Owner applicant Stan Jorgensen, and I am aware that the applicant has been has withdrawn the application.
Correct. So the applicant has withdrawn this application and on this agenda item for the time being.
I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
I'll second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, under new business, the proposed fee schedule.
Thank you very much. This last spring, the Planning and Zoning Department was tasked to look into the current permit fee process and evaluate for any changes. I collected data all summer long. We discussed this at our last Planning Commission meeting, and the proposed fee schedule for 2023 was included in your packet. Please let me know if you have any questions or if you'd like me to go over anything.
I think it's great work. I don't have any questions.
The fee schedule, as I have it for 2023, is all in black. The red portions is for what is already existing right now, just so that you could see where we are increasing, where we're not, where we're adding different items.
So the first four sections here where there are no 2022s, obviously this is something that we're just developing now.
Correct. It's a complete
history to it.
reformat.
Yeah,
So I have
okay.
no data to support what this would be, other than when we did the studies and compared, and it was very similar.
And we were talking about that, different square footages of homes, for instance, on building permits, and the larger the home, the permit fee should be adjusted upwards accordingly. And I don't know if these numbers are correct, but it's a good place to start. You know, next year we may wake up and say, hey, this isn't right, but you know.
This is the comparison that I followed for the summer that gave us pretty consistent values. So this really wouldn't create an increase for the residents of Nisswa. I think it would just standardize our process a little bit better. If we deem that an increase is necessary after doing this for maybe a year, we can revisit that at that time.
But there was research done with the surrounding communities too, and so this kind of fits in with what everybody else is doing.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Yeah, nice job.
Does it determine what all these fees are gonna be going towards once they're collected? You and Jenny just discussed that.
No, they'll be going to where they go right now, which I believe is the general fund.
General fund,
Is that
right.
correct? Yeah.
Maybe we can finally fix that leaky roof, huh?
The time will come when you have city provided inspection on projects.
Yeah,
And when that starts happening, then the fees get,
allocated to a
they change,
position.
they change dramatically, and
They
then
do.
then they get directed to where
At what point would that be? Is that based off population?
I believe it is, and I believe we have to hit 2,500.
Which
Don't
is
quote
what
me.
Breezy Point is at, correct?
Right,
and
so
they
Breezy
have-
Point has all of those
Ah.
fees. Baxter has those fees.
Okay.
So we're not there yet. I don't anticipate we'll be to 2,500 within the next 5 years or so. So,
Is that based on the census data?
Mhm.
Okay.
yeah, and I believe our census data, we actually decreased in population this last time.
decreased.
Really?
I think it was pretty nominal
It is.
percentage
nominal.
wise, but still, I think like 10, 20.
I think, yeah, 10.
I think
people
that's
are-
kind of shocking.
Oh, so keep in mind, that was 2020.
Yeah.
So data gathered
Uh,
pre-pandemic,
Yep.
and you have, I mean,
And it's.
I think we can all
year-round
fairly
residents.
assume that there's probably another 100 full-time residents here. I know that there's at least 6 more in my neighborhood, so
I know. I
that
know
covers
10 or-
almost half that loss.
I know 10 or 15 myself.
Well, we're at 21, so let's keep going.
Next census will be interesting, so.
Yeah.
okay.
Should have a special one, actually.
So for this, what are we looking for?
Just to recommend this fee schedule to the city council.
Okay.
I'd be happy to go through line by line if you want to, if you've had time to look over it, and if you're good, then we would just be looking for that recommendation tonight.
Personally, I like the lines, the last bullet point for each use permit where it's not getting overly greedy or aggressive, an additional, say for residential, another $150 for each thousand square feet. I think that's structured very well.
Yeah, my thought when I first looked at it, I thought maybe it's not enough, but it's a start.
It's a start.
Yeah.
Things
It's called
only go well.
adjustment in the
Well,
future.
now's your time to change it if you want.
No,
to see
no,
any
no, I
changes or
just,
anything.
no, because it's fine. We have to, what I think, the whole thing's gonna come down to when the city starts supplying more services. Follow up on these, where you gotta make sure that they do what they're supposed to.
Right, and then that will.
means building inspectors,
Yeah,
you
that's
know, and
exactly it.
when that happens, this schedule will change dramatically. That's the same
Yes.
thing we talked about before here, so.
Want to make a?
Sure. I think I'll recommend that the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment recommend to the city council to adopt I know it's got a title on it. Flip it over. Proposed planning and zoning fee schedule for 2023. That begin January 1st. 2023, correct?
That's the hope. Yes.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Good.
We need a vote on that?
Do we need a vote on it or is it just an approval?
Yep.
Okay.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries.
Nice work on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, yep. Old business, shoreland ordinance revision. Mr.
There an old
Pence.
guy in here?
Yes, you're the last
There
one.
he is. Old Chris.
Nobody's ever excited about an ordinance until it applies to their.
Yep.
Then they wonder, why did you write
Hmm.
this? Well, good evening. It's nice to be back again and weather has changed since I was here last time. It's a little more snowy out there. I'm one to stick my nose where it doesn't belong sometimes, but I would just advise you on your fee schedule to be careful how you state it, because fee schedule, according to statute, has to go to the cost of covering staff time to do the work and for your time to review the process. So there's perception that you're charging more to do things outside of that. I'm kind of a planning and zoning nerd, and so if you follow the start review in the last couple of years, the Home Builders Association in the Twin Cities has been suing local governments because they felt the fees were too high. And they were, and so they've had to lower some of those fees a little bit. So, not that you shouldn't raise the fees, because I support raising the fees, but they have to cover the cost of doing the work. And can't go towards, other aspects of the, city government, like fixing a leaky roof or something like that, right?
Fair enough.
But
I'd
just-
be willing,
That's just. that
I'd
can-
be willing to bet that the fees that we're showing on this schedule don't even touch what the
I would.
time that is spent by somebody.
I would agree with that 100%. But when people who are thinking the city is overcharging, they're not worried about the numbers, they're worried about the conversation. And if
Sure.
they hear, we're gonna use it to do something else, then they're like, see, I told you, but so just, again, I'm sticking my nose where it doesn't belong.
I'll clarify on the record, leaky roof is technically a code name for Bethany's salary.
Absolutely.
So
That-
bingo.
That was my
Yeah,
guess.
good.
I was assuming that. It
Thank
really
you.
was.
Thank you.
But I have been known to stick my nose where it doesn't belong, so
Yeah.
feel free to shut the door. And
I'm new at this.
you want me to kick off?
Yeah.
All right, well, we are sitting right now looking at update number 3 of the ordinance. I did make some notes in here that I just want to clarify a little bit. I said that this would be our final revision. Well, this isn't the final revision. We have one more revision coming to you at the January meeting. And that's where we're gonna kind of give you a button together, everything with a bow on it, and a ordinance at that point that you will be able to go forward with and proceed through the public hearing processes and all that takes to adopt an ordinance. So I don't know, is this the time when you talk about that potential having letting the public know about the ordinance at the January meeting? Yeah, I think what we're looking for right now is once we get some feedback from you guys tonight and kind of make sure that I'm steering the boat in the right direction. I think it'd be appropriate come to the January meeting that, Bethany just, I put it out for the public to come in and hopefully take a look at it, provide some comments. You guys can listen to those comments, you can digest, give me some feedback. If you want me to modify, I can, and then I would come back with a finished product by February. So it's nice to, it's nice to get the public, I think, involved in the process and not at the end. Because a lot of times I think people get frustrated with that because. they
This
feel
would
like
be
it's-
called an information session.
Yeah, it's not a public
not
hearing.
a
at
public
all.
hearing.
Not a public hearing and it's not published, it'll be something that Bethany will communicate to your concerned stakeholders that are invested in this ordinance and that, so. But anybody could come and talk. I mean, there's no limit to it, but it's not gonna be published as a.
Yep.
public
And our
hearing, so.
idea was to have that the same night as the January Planning Commission meeting, just because everybody will already be here. That and there's one agenda item right now for the January meeting, so that would be a good time.
Would that be like a Q&A type format? I think that would be more helpful.
Yep.
Yeah, I
I
think
would like
people
to see it very interactive, very approachable, not so formal.
Yep, no, I
And-
think people come up to the microphone and just
Yeah.
chat a little bit, bring up some stuff, we'll all make notes, then, we'll kind of circle back at the end and decide what, what made sense and, what didn't, and we can kind of explain maybe why we're going one direction and not maybe the direction that maybe the public was thinking and, have some explanation.
Will there be some advertising on that ahead of time so that they know where to go online and look at the?
Yeah, I'd be
The
happy to
draft.
notice that in the paper. We can, we can
Well,
get that.
yeah, you just have to notice it properly as
Yep.
more of
Yeah.
a listening session compared to a public hearing. that
Okay.
has some
Yep.
significant
Okay.
legal
And we can do that. And I would also like to provide them with the information of, most people don't sit and read the ordinance, right? So I would like to provide them with what we have, what we're proposing to change it with, and then have that discussion. So it's
Yep.
very transparent and very open.
Yes, this is something that we want to make sure that nobody feels like they got a surprise or anything like
Yeah.
that. And I'm not, maybe I've told you, I can't always remember, but this is also being reviewed by the DNR as we go. So as I do a revision, I send a copy down to their planners down in St. Paul, who I know pretty well, and say, give me some feedback. And they've given me some feedback on the first couple, and I've incorporated those changes, nothing of real substance, just some more tweaking. I haven't heard back on this version yet because this is more meat, but this is gonna take a little more digestion from them because this is stuff that we've got now, which is not in the shoreline rules, which is putting in, performance standards for things that back in 1989, when they wrote the rule, they didn't really think about some of these issues that we're, seeing today. So, and so, I don't know how if you guys have had a chance to look at it, or if if you got any questions, or if you want me to kind of just go through, kind of go through the orders a little bit, or, I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think-
We always start on this end, but I have not been here when the other revisions have been presented, so I'd rather tail off of what you two or the rest of everybody up here would have and then go from there.
Well, how about just we all read through it. How about just the major bullet points that you think
Yeah,
are?
absolutely. So a little bit of what we did was try to consolidate some of the setbacks into kind of one chart. And try to get the lot sizes and that into easily understandable charts and we're getting away from the narrative of having to read the setback for this property line is 15 feet. Just go to a chart, just go to a table, you can find it, it's easy to locate. And there's no issues with that. And so that I think is really helpful for clarification on that. Nothing has changed. If you look at like 20-48 there, and 49. There's a little bit of change in the structure height for 2048. Instead, I believe it was 33. Oh, I don't remember the numbers now. Do you remember, Bethany, what those numbers were on height? I think we made that.
25.
Yeah.
We're 25.
Yep,
Yeah.
25 is all across the board and.
Yeah, and so what we've got proposed at this point is building height, generally speaking, 30 feet. And if you have frontage on a public road, that gets bumped up to 35 unless you're in the CB district, which then would be a 20. Just, I think consistency is important there. And that 20 was left over from the previous ordinance, and I thought that one was intentional, and so we didn't choose to modify that. The section on accessory structures, 20-49, that's verbatim. So that's a cut and paste and reordering the kind of just refiguring a little bit of that table there on the number 4, but no changes to your accessory, no changes that right now also to your back, if we go back, needing a conditional use permit for residential structures that exceed 4,500 square feet. A CUP is still needed for that. Minimum average structure width is still 22 feet with the minimum living area of 850 square feet. That's verbatim from the previous ordinance, so that we brought that back in, so we didn't lose that. I'm working closely with Bethany to try to, as we can write an ordinance and I can make some things work, but I'm writing a subset of the ordinance. and not the entire piece, your commercial piece, PUD piece. And so we just don't want to miss something. You know, we don't want to miss a little snippet from somewhere in here. And so Bethany, on, I think what, last Friday, I think it was Friday, we went through it basically page by page and saying, did you catch this? Yep, I got that. Did you catch that? Oh, I'll stick that in there. So we're making sure that we're not going to miss any things that were really important that Nisswa finds that they want the ordinance. We're working hard to keep that in there, but it's just put in different locations. I think one of the key standards, I think, some folks are going to really like is under, if we go to Division 5, which is your residential district, your shoreline performance standards. If you go to 20-54, we have, what you have now is a very extensive and a very crystal clear expectations for requirements for stormwater and how somebody is to manage a stormwater. So when the ordinance says you need a stormwater plan for your development, you know exactly how to do it. You're going to basically expect there to be treatment of a 1-inch rain event with the capacity of being able to pass a 100-year flood event. So if you have a large rainfall, you don't want to have if it was like you've got a holding pond, you don't want that washed out. So you want to be able to pass that. And the reason we pick 1 inch, because if you go to the state of Minnesota, they have a minimal impact design standard, and their standard is 1.1 inch collects about 90% of the phosphorus and nutrients from runoff. That's called kind of the first flush. And so we just went with 1 inch. I thought 1.1 is just a little bit confusing. So that's the exact same standard. You'll find it on the other side of Round Lake for Crow Wing County. So this mirrors the county. So when somebody in Nisswa has to do something, somebody in Ugly Township on the other side would have to do it. So it's a very consistent approach for your contractors. They know this. There's a similar and I know the way that this ordinance spells out when you need to do it is that if your lot impervious is up to 15%, you don't need to do a stormwater plan. There will be no requirement for a stormwater plan unless there's a conditional use permit or a variance. But if we're talking of an administrative land use permit, you wouldn't have to implement a stormwater plan. Staff will provide the applicant some BMPs they can implement if they choose. And then if you look at going over 15 to 20, that is when you'd have to implement a stormwater plan. And that is looking at not just the new development, but the cumulative amount of impervious surface on the property. And then if you happen to hit 20 to 25, with 25 being the max, then you do a stormwater management plan, and you have to do some shoreline restoration work as far as getting vegetation reestablished on that shoreline. And we've got standards for that also that you've already adopted from previous ordinances, that you already have that in place. So that is really kind of the nuts and bolts of that. One of the provisions that also part of it is, so if you look at that, the shoreline district from a lake is 1,000 feet, from a river stream is 300 feet. What we've done is we've divided that in half. And so you have your shoreline protection zone, which is the first 500 feet to the lake and back, and then the shoreline protection zone. So standards are different in the protection zone when you're 500 feet or close than those that are 500 feet and further away. So these stormwater standards apply to that within 500 feet of the lake. Once you get back out of the 500 feet, then the stormwater standards don't kick in automatically. They could still be required through other processes, but they're not something that would be administratively required by Bethany as she administers the ordinance. So trying to make sure the differentiation between I'm a riparian owner and I live 950 feet away from the lake, a little bit of difference on how I think we should probably treat those folks. One thing that is in here, and it also is consistent with the county ordinance, is the use of permeable surfaces. So right now, the way that this, from the DNR, the way that they have their program is that if you use a permeable system like a permeable paver, blacktop, cement, which is basically designed so that when the water comes, it'll go through. There's pores in there. Right now, the DNR recommendation is that you could get 50% credit for impervious. So if you put in 200 square feet of a patio that's made of impervious surface, that would only count as 100 square feet. You still would have technically 100 square feet. We have worked with the DNR to get approval to allow up to 100% of that, because the ordinance requires the property owner to notify the city by the 1st of every year that they have done the maintenance on that system. Permeable systems work wonderfully until it gets silted in or gets covered with leaves. And so if they want to choose to do that, they are then required to do that maintenance and submit that information to the city that that has been accomplished. If they refuse to do that, not a problem. It's just not an impervious surface. And if you're over your impervious surface, we might have a problem. So it gives people the flexibility of doing something that would allow them to improve their property. But they really have, it really would require Bethany that you basically keep a spreadsheet of people who are choosing to do this. And I can tell you, when I was at the county, I had a spreadsheet of like 3 people that really wanted to do it because they weren't sure about the maintenance, there's the uncertainty piece. But there were some who really fit in nicely with what they're trying to do. And so it really worked well. And so I don't expect people to use it every day, but it is definitely an option out there for landowners who are willing to, do more to improve their property and do more for that water quality perspective. So we want to encourage it, but we also want to make sure they know what they're walking into when they do that. And so that's kind of the summary of the stormwater side. Dave, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that. I'd love any feedback you've got, or if there's anything you think that we might be missing or need to modify. I'd love to get any feedback, so. Yeah, not tonight. I don't know. I don't think to read it tonight and give me, that's a lot.
I was just wondering that myself, if Woodseth Smith's office has had a chance
Yep.
to just really boil this thing down, but probably not.
Yep.
None of us have.
Yeah,
we want the numbers, David.
It's been in place at the county for going on 15 years. So it's been pretty, I think it stood the test of time as far as, being an effective strategy to, to help mitigate water quality and to allow people to frankly develop their property. Because it's a balance, property rights, water quality, both. And so, there's a give and take on both sides. Then we also have standards in place that clarify what your shoreline buffer management standards are and what mitigation is required. We have standards in the ordinance for what amount of vegetation are you allowed to remove when you're talking about how much vegetation within within the shore impact zone, which is the setback between the house and the lake. Well, how much vegetation removal is allowed in there? It really is, you're dealing with a lot of lots, I'm assuming, where a lot of vegetation has been cleared in the past, and you've got some lawns to the lakes and that sort of thing. This more applies to more of those new lots that really haven't had that vegetation removed. There's some guidelines and restrictions to how many, you can't just go wipe every tree out and wipe everything out there. You have to follow the guidelines that you've got in 20-56. Which basically says intensive vegetation clearing within shore impact zone 1 is not allowed, except for a few provisions in the ordinance that as far as activities that you would be able to do on there, like put in a stairway to the lake, or to put a sand blanket in, or those sorts of things. And you've also adopted in your previous ordinance, and we're going to keep it, is the remind me about the SRA, and was that shoreline restoration? The model for estimating, yes, Fran, what does that stand for again? I think it's shoreline restoration and mitigation model, I think is what it stands for. In essence, what it is, it's a way of an objective way to go down the parcel and look what's there. So they're at 23% impervious, and the ordinance says you need a buffer. It's not Bethany going down and, it's a very objective thing where you look at shore impact zone 1 and you analyze what's there as far as how many trees, forbs, grasses in shore impact zone 1 and 2, and then you get a score. And based on that score, it'll tell you number of feet width of how much buffer you need to restore. And the restoration standards are to restore it to a native buffer, a no-mow area where it wouldn't be allowed to mow that area down.
Yeah.
So it doesn't require a lot of activity on the landowner's part. It basically means stop mowing there and let the native grasses that are already going to come up, let them grow, and they will take over from the bluegrass that's down there right now. So it's pretty simple. It doesn't require, and people can do whatever they want. I mean, we've had some people who went down there and planted pollinator habitats and did some really neat things, and it was just beautiful. But for some folks, they just want to get the permit and move on. So
It's a shoreline rapid assessment.
rapid assessment model, that's what it is. It's something that the DNR worked on. So.
And you would be processing the rapid assessment?
Yep.
Okay,
And so the way
There's a
that
form to
works-
fill out and you sign it and you add it into.
but
the
there's no
application.
you don't have to go out to the property, it's just
Yes, you do.
You have to,
Okay.
you have to go look at it to get it.
Well, yeah. but you would be going out there, who would be doing that?
I would.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's staff does the analysis and then they come back and, you know, if you've done the onsite yourself, you can look at it and say, well, maybe you should tweak this number and maybe, you know, whatever. But typically you'll go with what staff says. And if the landowner says, I don't like that, I think that model was wrong. Well, that's when you're the appeals board. So then they can appeal her decision to the Planning and Zoning Commission and you determine if what she did was correct. So there's always everything you do administratively, there's always a remedy that the landlord can come back and ask for somebody to reveal it, you know, to look at it from appeal standpoint. So it would follow, you know, what you currently have right now as far as being able to appeal any decision that Bethany makes is appealable to you guys, that you would have to act on that and determine if she made the right decision or not.
I'm curious on that when you get to it to see how that works.
The SRAMs,
Yeah,
it's a very useful tool. It just helps you decide and figure out what the depth of the shoreline buffer. It doesn't actually decide if you are going to have a buffer or not. That's decided by your impervious or decided by the planning commission or decided with those avenues, but it helps figure out if it needs to be 10 feet, 15 feet or 20 feet deep.
And typically you generally are with the landowner doing it. So you bring this out and say, well, what do you think? You know, let's talk about this. And you kind of have a little bit of a discussion if they're there, which helps to bring them along to kind of understand that too. So sometimes it's not, sometimes you have a landowner who's not available or whatever, but a lot of times, my experience has been a lot of landowners want to be there when you're out there looking at stuff because they want to be able to answer questions or whatever. So, you know, then you can have some discussion with the landowner that time and, you know, come to an agreement. Yeah, that's what I think it is. So now that means a 10-foot buffer or what. So, you know, there's lots of ways of going about that so that, you know, the landowner feels like they've got input and they're part of the process and not just being simply dictated to.
that was kind of a gray area, especially with like the Nisswa Lake developments where we went there and that's, I mean, you and I noticed it right away. So it'd be nice to have a standard. So that's
It's
good.
pretty objective.
Yeah,
It's-
and in that instance, that was all wetlands, so that was out of our hands as far as that's
Yeah.
concerned, you know. Mhm.
Do you feel as if you have the necessary time and resources to enforce this?
Yes.
Especially during peak season in the summer, or I should say spring to summer months?
Yes.
You know, I think it would be.
Depends
interesting-
on our fee schedule.
I think it'd be interesting to maybe.
Yeah, you mean leaking a roof?
Well, it'd be interesting to do a quick analysis and look at how many permits over the last 2 years have been 20% impervious. Because that's what would be required.
Good.
And so, you know, I'm looking from my time in the county. You weren't going out and doing 150 a year, you know, and the county which
Right.
issues maybe 1,200 permits a year. You might do 20. I
Sure.
would be surprised if she did 5.
Okay.
And
So I don't.
more time will be spent approving stormwater management plans.
Yes,
I
correct.
guarantee you, and that the SRAM is just an addition to that stormwater management plan. But as far as approving the plans, doing the calculations, it does require a site visit, but it's one that's already being done. And it does require a lot of desktop analysis as far as doing calculations for the basins and the best management practices. But
Yep.
I do anticipate that we will see a lot more permits now that we are requiring shoreland alteration permits. I do see that we will. So I don't think I can safely say, oh, we don't do that many permits because we have yet to see how many. But I think this is the correct and the best way to make sure that we are capturing what we can do to preserve water quality and still have people develop their property in a responsible way.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Additionally, do you believe that we'll have enough, or maybe do we need to budget any additional funds to compensate for additional management technologies? So we're consistent with most current versions for the Minnesota Stormwater Manual, et cetera. Are we,
You just pull
adequate.
that right off the website. It's on the PCA website. That's all available.
well, that's phenomenal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no issues at all with
Okay.
that. So.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah, and you know, this process, the shoreland rapid assessment model, the stormwater management plans, calculating impervious, these are all things that I have done in the past.
Okay.
Very familiar with it.
Well, and I think one recommendation I would make too, a couple items. One would be, you know, we can put together a packet of information to give to the landowner that says, you know, you need a stormwater management plan. You can do it yourself, and here's how you do it.
I think it'd be a great idea.
Or you can go talk to Dave and you can hire an engineering firm, not Dave specifically, but you know, you can hire somebody to do it on your behalf. So
Right.
you give people options.
Yep.
On how to do that. So.
Soil
we're
and
not
water.
just-
Also, we'll do a
Yeah,
stormwater
and
management plan.
Conservation District will help with that.
Good.
Yeah. So we'll give them, you know, you want to give them options so that they don't feel like I have to go right to somebody
Absolutely.
and spend $2,500 on.
It's-
something, so.
What I've found is that most people have practical and logically place stormwater features on their property without even knowing it. And most of the time you go out to the property and you see that they've already got these in play. You say, please put these on your plan, right? Because it's all part of the approved plan. So you have them put the existing stormwater features that they have, any proposed. And then when there's a specific need to address a project that's being done, we just make sure that the basins are large enough to hold the increased impervious.
There's easy to use calculators where you punch in your impervious and it's an auto, it's like an auto PDF. It'll spit out, here's how much square footage of infiltration you'd need based on depth.
Hmm.
And then it'll give you a number of gallons if you want to try to figure out with rain barrels. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can, work through that process. And
Okay.
the other piece that I would recommend, I don't want to give Bethany more work to do, but I do think there'd be some value in it, keeping track at the end of the year so you can report back as, because of the new ordinance, what did we do differently in 23 than what we would have done in 22? And then, you would keep that going year to year. So you can then begin to really look at some of those comparisons, like you mentioned. Well, how many are we doing?
Quarterly,
Yeah, I
Maybe.
really think it, and then you can look back.
I've had more work.
Well, then you can look at the ordinance and go, whoa, we missed it there.
Right.
Like we whiffed on that one, we got to tweak that one, or, well,
Right.
that was a single, but we really want to double here, so we need
Yep.
to change it.
Yeah.
It gives you some chance. Once you write an ordinance, it's very dynamic, it's fluid. You can change it whenever you want. And so you don't want to, get to the point of where it's just so set in stone, you never touch it. So you want to be able to have that adaptive management where you can say, yeah, this is working great. Oh man, I couldn't believe we lucked out on that one, but this one over here, might work for the county. It didn't work so good for Nisswa. We need to modify that. So
And
but
I'd
just-
also,
I think that data helps to answer those questions.
yeah, and I'd like to share with you that I collected a lot of data on permits this last summer, and I have no plans in stopping that. We were able to capture a lot of different things. I think as I was doing it, I was like, okay, what am I going to want next year? How can we do this? Because if you're putting in the data from one permit, just make sure that we're collecting what we want. So if anybody has any ideas of any information that they want, starting to collect next year, let me know. I'd be happy to work that in the process. I'm already doing it. It was really valuable, so I'm going to continue to do it.
What were some of the things that you noticed?
Just from I can easily tell you how many decks we put on or how many, so you have all that data. It kind of captures what was done development wise. This next year, we're going to be adding stormwater, or the stormwater management plans. We'll be adding the shoreline alteration permits. We'll be adding all those things. So we'll be able to see what we have. And I know that I only issued 2 or 3 grading only permits where there was dirt moving that was permitted in the shoreland district. And I can guarantee you that the amount of permits that I issued last year are not indicative of the amount of work that people are doing in their front yards that are living on a lake.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Oh, yeah.
my aim with the shoreland alteration permit, and why I felt this was so important to do, is that when people call and they want a permit and they want to see what they should do, we didn't have a really good roadmap to help them develop their property. There's a lot of fun things that you can do with your shoreland. It's really great to own a lake property. And we just didn't have the tools to help them develop it and then still be able to capture, like you said, the phosphorus, the nutrient loading, and all of those things that could have detriment to our lakes.
When you
So,
put this type of an ordinance together with these performance standards, people get an opportunity to look at that. I can do that. I would never guess. Well, yeah, you can. You just have to stay within these rules, so it provides people opportunity to think a little bit outside the box. 'Cause a lot of times people are like, I just want a boathouse. Well, you know what? We're not allowing a boathouse anymore, but you could have a little shed over here, and it could be here, and you go, oh, I didn't think that, So what you're trying to do is help guide people in the direction that you want and discourage the things that you don't want. I mean, that's really what you're trying to do. You've got standards in the ordinance now that are very clear about bluff and steep slope vegetation. How much vegetation can you remove on a bluff, which is now none, except for putting steps and stairways, lifts and landings down there. Because anytime you remove vegetation off a bluff, it's going to typically erode because bluffs are typically gravel, and you start to remove vegetation, and that's when you start seeing the landslides and things. I've got a picture, not on the Nisswa side of Gull Lake, but on the Fairview side, where some folks were mucking around in a bluff, and I got a call and went out there, and there were hostas in the water. I didn't know hostas were a underwater, native lake plant. Turns out they were that day. The whole top of that bluff, because they cut the whole thing down. I have a friend, I don't want to admit this out loud, but He's over on the Mississippi River and he's on a bluff, and he went in and tried to cut in a line so that he could get power down and run a pump to. He called me up, I went, "What'd you do? You know, you did something." Oh, I did that. I'm like, and he had extensive money to try and refix it, which once a bluff goes, they're pretty darn hard to fix, you know?
Mhm.
So we want to, you know, it's a real protection because those bluff lands are
Yep.
very, very sensitive. 20-59 is probably the next one I'd say is probably one of the more important ones. Grading, filling, and dirt moving activities. This will very clearly explain what people can do in the shoreline area as far as, you know, dirt moving within shore impact zone 1, within shore impact zone 2, ice ridges. So you have ice ridges, which are the bump by the lake where the ice is pushed up over the years. You have a annual ice ridge, which happened 1 year, and then you have a historic ice ridge. Clarifies how do you handle those and what are required for that. And those all, you know, are going to require shoreline alteration permits and working with Bethany on that. You got what's needed to do in shore impact zone 2, which is the second half of the setback, and then what can you do in the setback to the rear lot zone, which is all the way back to the 1,000-foot buffer on a lake. It's got standards for like how you would handle exposure. Somebody has bare ground, you know, exposed because they've been doing a project on their property, is, you know, building whatever. They've got 21 days to get that permanent, you know, to get vegetation started on that property. 21 days to get that going. And they need to get it stabilized. And so there's just some very specific standards in here that I think make it easy for Bethany to be able to say, here's the expectation. We need this by this date, and it eliminates a lot of the, I think you should do, or this seems to be a good idea, but this is what the rules say and I have to follow it. You have standards in place now for retaining walls and when they're allowed. Basically, a retaining wall within the shore impact zone 1 or 2 is allowed if there's erosion. Period. If that's a solution, the only solution that you have to fix erosion, you can build a retaining wall. Otherwise, they're not allowed within shore impact zone 1. Once you get behind shore impact zone 2, you get back in the setback. Retaining walls aren't regulated back then. Once you get back behind 75 feet on Gull Lake, you don't have to get a permit to build a retaining wall. You go for it. So again, we're just trying to focus on areas where we think there's the most return on the investment to making sure that things are done right. You got standards in place for riprap. So putting the rock armor on shoreline to help prevent erosion. Again, this is in place where there's erosion documented, and vegetation is not the only thing that will solve that problem. And so when you're going to put in riprap, you get a riprap, you get a permit from the city, the shoreline alteration permit. 199 feet is the extent to what the city can permit. Anything above that is a DNR permit at 200 feet and above. And so if you have to get a DNR permit, there's no need to get a city permit at that point. So you get one or the other. But if you're going to put in riprap, you have to put a buffer behind that riprap, because there's a reason why your shoreline is eroding. That's because you got, you know, lawn and right down to the water's edge.
Yeah.
And so we want a buffer behind that so that they're both kind of working together. So
Yeah.
you got your question.
Yeah, I had a question about the riprap. We just did it on our shoreline and the river. And he was telling us how, I'm not sure which entity was kind of not really wanting riprap anymore because of the heat that it does. Is that right?
You know, I think that's been argued. So that's a good, I mean, people say that when you put that rock in the shore, in the water, the rock heats up and the water heats up more. I haven't seen any studies that verify that. I don't know if that's true. I think you have people on one side of the world that says, I want to hard armor everything. And, you know, I want to make sure that nothing will move. And a lot of times, nothing personal, David, it's engineers who want hard armor because they know that's going to work. Then you got the other side of the world that says, we just want vegetation. And so we're going to put willow wattles and all this soft armor stuff. And then, you know, sometimes that north wind comes out and the ice goes off and you have a problem again. I think more pragmatic is in the middle, saying we might need some structural rock at the toe to stop some of that, and we're gonna put some vegetation behind it. So I think it's that middle approach, which most things are in life. You're not usually one extreme or the other. So there are just folks who really think riprap's a bad idea, and there are folks who think riprap's the only way to go. They both are usable. They're both valuable in the right situation and used properly. So
What is so it has a vegetative buffer landward on the riprap. Is there a
that would be the requirements from your shoreline rapid assessment model. Okay. The same standards for that would be the same standards for this.
Okay.
Yeah. The key to why I think I was even brought into this situation is the boardwalk standards.
Yeah.
So that's a number 62. And so you've got basically 10 standards that need to be met to build a boardwalk. One is that they are the preferred method to accessing public waters across riparian wetlands. That's how we want to get, if you have a wet front shoreline, we want you to build your boardwalk to get across it. And based on Minnesota Rule 8420, which is the Wetland Conservation Act that Bethany was referring to at an application earlier, according to that rule, boardwalks are not considered fill. When they're on posts and pilings, if they're rested on top of the wetland, that's considered fill. But on posts and pilings and elevated, then it is not considered fill. The ticket to this ordinance is number 3. Boardwalks need to be built perpendicular to the shoreline as to the greatest extent possible. There's no parallels. We're not going to run boardwalks around our lake in parallel. Perpendicular. And there's also a setback. So you need a side yard setback, 10 feet, gotta have it in at least 10 feet. And so this is the one that I think where you have your riparian use area, and that is the water in front of your house. If you take your lot lines and you extend them out into the lake as they're coming off the angle of the line, that in front of you is considered your riparian use area. You know, it is public waters, but it is the area that your lot extends into. And what you don't want is somebody to build a boardwalk that goes straight in front of your house. And so we were saying that you can't build your boardwalk such that it's going to get in that riparian use area. DNR does the same thing with docks. There basically says you can't build a dock such that obstructs neighboring properties from navigation. This, I think, is a little more clear in saying, we just don't want you to be sticking your stuff in your neighbors out in front of your neighbor's house. We think it's appropriate.
So going back to the post, the feet, so if you have a foot on the bottom of the post, that's
That's fine.
considered fill?
Nope, you can do that. As long as it's just, the feet that are on there, that would be fine. It's typically doesn't usually work too well because the wetlands are usually pretty soft.
Yeah,
And it doesn't usually have enough structure to be able to actually hold it in place. So typically you do need to put those posts and pilings in place to actually get the boardwalk to stay where it's supposed to.
You had touched on this before on the temporary or permanent pilings and what those are.
Yep.
Because I think some of the standards were like, if you go on the DNR website, it will be, I showed it was best practices and they use stumps. And I think we talked about stumps being, well, that's not really a great use. So,
It would be the same type of wood you would use for those when you see a pier being built out for those public docks. It'd be the same concept as that.
well, sometimes if you go to wetland, there's no bottom. I mean, you could
Yeah,
keep
no,
going.
you can, and the response in that situation is that's unfortunate. You might not be able to put a boardwalk in
Right.
because if you keep going and trying to find sand, you might go down 20 feet and just be sitting in muck. So, again, I might be sticking my nose where it doesn't belong, but when people come and they buy property in Nisswa, they have certain expectations of what they want to do.
Mhm.
And so if they come in and they buy a piece of property, they want a beach and it's got a wetland front on it. You should have bought a property that had sand, nice sand, because you can't put sand in that wetland to make a soft beach on the front. And so a lot of times it's when people, you need to set expectations for people. Yeah, this lot might have been a little bit cheaper than this one over here, but it's got limitations. You might not be able to build that boardwalk because you could sit there and pound until you're driving it down and you might never hit sand. You might never hit something firm. So, that's a challenging part that Bethany, I think, gets to deal with sometimes is helping people understand expectations of what can I do here, just based on the physical attributes of this property. Not every property has got that beautiful rolling to the lake, and then you hit that soft bottom with no rock and no weeds, and that's the idyllic. That's the ideal piece of property that goes for $5,600 a square foot or a front foot on the property, right? And then you try to buy something that's got that wet front, you might be looking at 3,500 versus that 5 to 6, and there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
So it's just sometimes they may want a boardwalk, and it just simply may not be an option.
so this might be a question for Bethany. How do you handle so if someone buys a piece of property that's unimproved and you got people on both sides that are lawn to the lake, how do they not have that same opportunity to have that lawn to the lake if they wanted it? I mean, is there like a grandfathering? Is there a?
In that instance, what you just described, no, there would not be. And that has a lot to do with just helping the property owner learn about what they can and can't do according to Minnesota
So
rule.
the grandfather you mentioned would apply to the folks that currently had the lawn that has
Yeah.
never been, if that's been lawn forever and it was never subject to.
But it was.
I understand what you're saying, but the rule, they could come in and
Yeah.
so anytime somebody sees something in the ordinance and they don't like it, they can always apply for a variance. So they could come to you and say, you know what, my neighbor here, both have lawns and lake. I want the same thing. Let me do it. And then you guys have to go through the variance criteria spelled out in Minnesota statute 462 and decide, do they meet that criteria of being able to grant the variance or not? And if you feel they do, you approve it. If you feel they don't, then you deny it. So anything in here that relates to structural, relates to size and height and those sorts of things, you can apply for a variance. But then you've got a use variance, and that means this property says only allows me to use, I'll go to the extreme. This property says I can only build a house on it, or I can only build something residential. Well, I'm in the business of building dynamite factories. I want a variance to allow me to do that here. That's illegal. You can't even technically grant that variance. So you just have to know you have your area variances, and that's where you have a practical difficulty standard that you apply to make sure that it meets those statutory requirements. And then you have your use requirements. And if somebody comes to the office and asks for a use variance, it's Bethany's job to say, I can't even take that application because that's not allowed. You are having to follow the use standards for that district as outlined in our ordinance. And if you want to amend that, then you come in to amend the ordinance to say, I think we should allow dynamite factories in the shoreline. And then you get to wrestle with that and decide, is that a good idea? Now, obviously, we're talking very facetious, but it just gives you the idea that if somebody were to come in and want to, change uses, that's a different story versus area. Area variances are practical difficulty.
And that's where you see things where people want to rezone and then they'll apply for a variance, or
Right,
then they'll
right,
apply for
yeah.
that. And some projects like that would require you to rezone your property. You just can't do it on that property.
Correct.
So
And
that's
that's
the
what the struggle was
differentiation.
tonight is, you've got folks coming in that want to rezone the property and everybody else wants, what are you gonna do? I don't know yet. I'd have to get it rezoned before I can even begin to make plans because I don't want to invest money into development
Exactly.
until I know I think you need to do it or not. So it's like this two-step process, and I feel for the public because they're just like, oh, I want to know, but it's like, I can't tell you until I, really know what I'm doing. So I think you guys did a great job of communicating that tonight, to the folks that were here. I thought that you did a really nice job with that. Again, the maximum width of your boardwalk is 6 feet. The boardwalk supports need to be constructed above the wetland surface, a minimum of 12 inches, and that's so that sunlight can get underneath there and vegetation still is allowed to grow. And the boardwalk again may be placed on that temporary or permanent pilings, and it can incorporate railings. And the last provision was, this is another big ticket that I think is super important. So you have your ordinary high water mark. Everything above the ordinary high water mark is under the regulation of the city of Nisswa. Everything below that is underneath the regulation of Department of Natural Resources. So you're going to allow a boardwalk up to the OHW. If they want one beyond that, they go talk to DNR and get a permit to go beyond the OHW. I think that would nip anything in the bud as far as any, because your OHW sometimes not very far out there. That's the end of your jurisdiction. Anything beyond that, DNR is only responsible to permit that. And so you'll never have an issue where somebody could come out and do something crazy under a city permit.
Yeah.
DNR permit, they'd be the ones responsible to permit anything beyond the OHW. I think that would handle both, the issues I think that are out there. You have some standards in place. If you have a lake that doesn't have a public access on it, you're allowed to put a private water access ramp in to build on your property if you have the right slope and that kind of thing. There's standards for that. 2064, this is one that was, again, another hot button topic at the county. It's the discussion of controlled and alternative access lot. So a controlled access lot is where somebody that is not on the lake has access through a property that's riparian via an easement or a platted. So a lot of, back, they had a lot of plats where you could put 20 houses back there and there was like common lot. And so we're saying that's a no-go. We're not, no more of those. And that's consistent with what the ordinance currently says. So you're not allowed to plat and then have that lot to allow those folks to have access to the lake. The alternative access lot, this is where the county kind of got wrapped around the axle on this one a little bit. What this is intended to do is that if you've got a piece of property and you can divide it in 4 lots. And each of those lots has a wetland fringe, but there is a high ground lot as part of that property. As part of this, you have the ability to say, you know what? We're not gonna go docks out. Your dock's got this alternative access over here. That's where you can put your docks out on, because we're trying to limit, we don't want people to go through the wetland with the boardwalk if we don't have to. We would rather have them, go through that alternative access where they can put that dock out in a consistent location that's in high ground. And then they would just have they would share the ownership of that lot. So only for riparian lots, not riparian, which would make it a controlled access, but an alternative access. And I think clarifying that, and it's a conditional use permit, so it's not like Bethany has the ability to make that decision as staff.
Yeah.
You guys would make that decision that it would require a conditional use permit. And so the public is made aware, can come in and have conversations. Put in standards so we understand what's allowed as far as stairways, walkways, lifts and landings. How do you get down to the water? Just really consistent with 6120. There were just some provisions in here that I found that just weren't meeting what the state rules are. So we fixed that and got you there. We have some information now about water oriented accessory structures as far as what you can do residentially, what you can do commercially, square footage size, setback size, height size, all those issues. And that's all allowed through the Minnesota Rule 6120. We just have some clarification points as to how you're going to do it. New boathouses are not allowed as was in the current ordinance. You can't build new boathouse, but you can do a small oriented structure if you'd like. We have standards now in place for patios. Where are you allowed to build a patio on the shoreline? And what are the setbacks and what's the maximum size and those issues? So
Can we go
that's
back
all-
to-
That's all been figured.
Can we go back to existing boathouses?
Yeah.
There's a lot on Gull, and we all know that. Is there any additional verbiage that we should be including in there regarding repairs of these things, cracks, foundations to plumbing down there?
Yep, I referenced statute 462.357, and that's a statute that allows the rebuilding of those structures, so.
I got homework.
If you run into the reason why I was been referring to statute, my previous ordinance work, I would write that out. And put it in the ordinance, and then the next year the legislature changes that ordinance. Well, then I gotta changes that statute, then I gotta change the ordinance. Well, if they change the legislation, it's still in the ordinance, and it still applies. So,
Got it.
and it makes the ordinance a little bit smaller, and I think easier to read, and then people can just refer to those statutes for the information that they need.
In the past, Bethany, I'm trying to think of the last time we had that where he wanted to change the roof. Is that what it was? I think he withdrew the application, but he wanted to change the roof angle or something like that.
He's still planning on seeking a variance,
That
right?
would be a
now.
That would be,
Um,
yeah.
So
Yep,
under that,
so-
under the 357 statute, you're allowed to rebuild exactly what's there. Height, square footage, roof, you get
You can modify
exactly what you
pitch.
get. If you want to make it flat, feel free. Bad idea. You can't make it any taller. So you basically have to you get to rebuild exactly what you got. And there's no.
I think what it was is the roof line was going this way and he wanted it to match the other ones going this way. Is that right?
He has a flat roof on the house and he wants the boathouse to
Okay.
match the house. Our ordinance right now doesn't allow for that. This doesn't either. And I think we need to put that in there, is
Yeah.
that we have a minimum of a 412 pitch, I
Yeah.
think, for our boathouses. And I think
Yeah.
whatever we need to do I think keep that. I think that was the intent of what we had, is to
Yeah.
make sure that,
So it's a minimum of 412?
yeah, right now it is.
Yep.
And it basically, you can't use it as a deck.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So we would put on the water or accessory structures and a boathouse.
Now, if you have a boathouse that has a lovely large deck and it's existing and it's been there since 1952, you get to keep that.
You can do that.
You get to scrape and rebuild it if you want to.
Correct.
Yeah, so.
So we do have.
If anybody
patios.
wants to see one, there's one right down Hagerwood Drive, owned by the mills. It's
And if they're
pretty
handled
cool.
right, they're kind of neat. If they're done right. They're
Yeah.
kind of fun to have. So then we have standards for swimming pools, when you're going to require a permit for swimming pools. Just to clarify that, and then we put in clarifying language, when you can have a guest cabin And a guest quarter, a guest cabin is a separate individual dwelling unit that cannot exceed 700 square feet in size. The guest quarter is basically that over top of a garage, over top of an accessory structure, still limited to that 700 square feet of livable area. This is a deviation from Minnesota shore state rule. This is a deviation. And so when you deviate from the rule, the DNRs will entertain it, but they want to see some horse trading to get, what are we gonna get back in this? Because the minimum rules would say if you want to have a guest cabin or a guest quarter, you have to have duplex lot size. You have to have enough lot, you have to have 2 lots that would meet the standards of today's ordinance to be able to have a guest quarter.
And that's 700 square feet.
And then 700 square feet is the only thing.
That was my
that's
college
not-
apartment.
Yeah, the only thing that doesn't jive with this is the fact that you can put it on a residential lot that does not have double the lot.
Right.
size. And so, what the DNR has agreed to,
That's
is-
really small.
yeah, it's not big, no.
No.
But what the DNR has allowed is that, basically you're going to, run that Sean Rapid assessment model. And you're gonna.
I mean, I would argue that most people that are going to pay to have a guest cabin or quarters like this are gonna be in the shoreline residential district.
Yes.
Just a hunch, right?
Mhm.
So then somebody wants to do a 750 variance.
Variance. Yep.
Variance.
Yeah, so you could, if you have a 100-foot wide lot, if you have an existing lot of record, you could come in and get a permit to build a 700 square foot guest quarters or a guest cabin. But then you would, the DNR, the trade-off was that we're gonna assess the shoreline vegetation. And so we want to make sure if you're gonna build that second structure, that we want to make sure we have a shoreline buffer in place. And if you have one, you could just go ahead and build. So that was a trade-off that they were willing to do. And I thought
Fair enough.
it was a pretty reasonable, because it allows somebody who's got a 100 square foot lot to build that second guest quarters, for when they have family come up or, for weekends, that sort of thing. And the truth is, people are doing it anyway, right? So if you're gonna do it anyway, one thing I've found with ordinances is that when you run into a situation where people are doing stuff anyway, you gotta find out a way to permit it so that they're legal, but you're still meeting the intent of what the city wants as far as its growth. And so this is one where I used to get calls from people saying, oh, we have so many people building these, lying to us and they'll get a permit for a garage and it becomes a guest quarters. I'm like, just let them build a guest quarters. Well, that's against the rules. Well, it's not, because you can work through that. So a lot of times, I think when you're doing regulatory, it's easy to stand in front of a tree and maybe not see the big picture of the world.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you got these really big situations that are really bugging you. And then we just have some provisions for decks and how you can, add on to a deck if it was built prior to 1970 and what the provisions are for that. And that comes right from the rule. And then we just have a provision also for use of fertilizer. So making sure that the Minnesota statutes are clear in the ordinance as to how much fertilizer use is allowed in the shoreline district.
Very well done.
That is what I have so far.
Oh, thank you.
Bethany, do you have anything you wanted to bring up? Probably I can't remember. I had some notes written down. I think I'm gonna put some language in that clarifies a temporary travel trailer. As what is that? How does
Oh,
that-
that's a good idea.
Yeah, we
Okay.
don't have certain provisions in place for travel trailers, RVs,
Yeah.
park models, people with fair land, people in the shoreline district. At what point is it just for the weekend, somebody can use it? Because they're coming up for the 4th of July and they're going to grandpa's house and, general use versus parking it for the entire summer or for several years.
I think crowing is 14 days.
14 days, it becomes a permanent structure and then it requires a permit.
Yeah, and I think we were chatting about with the city and the closer quarters. We're thinking the 7-day window might be more appropriate for the city versus the county, so.
Yeah.
I think we'll put that provision in.
So then it doesn't move for 7 days, or is it like, how do you get people not going around?
Basically, it means
back
that
out,
if
back
you're
out?
bringing a travel trailer to a parcel and as long as you meet setbacks and you're not located in the road right away, you're not doing, you're using it in a responsible manner, you don't need to seek a permit for that.
Mm.
We don't want people to come up here and enjoy the area with their RVs and have to get a permit just to park their
No,
RV.
for a
That-
week at a time.
that's-
Beyond a week, well, then it's a different story. Then after a week, you get a permit. What we want to avoid is, I park it here for 7 days and then I drive it off, I drive around the block and I come back, it's a new 7 days. So we're gonna clarify that it's not 7 days at a time, but it's 7 days in a calendar year. It's 7 days that you can park. So maybe it's 2 days this weekend and 3 days next weekend and 2, you can break it up. It doesn't have to be consecutive, but a maximum of 7. And
You're gonna track that?
well, okay.
Yeah,
so-
we-
so
we
brutally
talked-
honest- brutally honest,
That's
that-
like the
that is hard to
VRBO
do.
situation.
Yeah, and-
Neighbors usually do a good
Well,
job
that-
tracking
that's
that.
exactly- So she's never gonna know. She'll never know unless the neighbors would show up and say, hey, it's been there now for 8 days. Okay, well,
Yeah.
then you're gonna drive out, have a
Yeah,
conversation.
and when we talked on Friday, I thought we clarified that that was 7 days. And not in a calendar year, that was 7 days at a time.
Right.
Is that somebody could come up for a 4-day weekend and then somebody could come up on Memorial Day for a 4-day weekend and then somebody could come up and use their
But after
property. I want
7
people to be able to use their
right.
property. What we're trying to prevent is people using their property in a way that encourages basically like boondocking and not caring for their wastewater or their.
But if they want to keep it consecutively there for day 8, that's when the permit would trigger.
Yep,
They need
and
to get
then we
permit
can
for
make
it.
sure that they're meeting setbacks, then a
And
permit would be
wastewater,
issued.
all those sort of things.
Is there a provision for number? Because Crowing originally had 4, now they're down to 1.
It was a density issue. It was seen as a dwelling unit. And so on a bare piece of land, you could have a primary dwelling and a guest cottage. And so you could get a permit for up to 2 travel trailers for Crow Wing County.
Okay,
But if you had a house, you could get 1. And if you had a house and a guest cottage, you couldn't. So, and then I think campground standards kick in at what? 5.
So-
And
so
so then they'd
originally-
be subject to campground.
Originally, the ordinance in Crowing was written such that you could have up to 4 campers on your parcel.
Right.
4, and then the 5th one will kick in, you need to get a campground conditions permit and a permit from the state top.
1 now.
So now, so that at the time, the commissioners at that point, 13 years ago, thought that was a great idea. Recent commissioners since thought that, well, maybe it didn't work. So again, we take your direction from your elected folks and sometimes, things change.
And we entertain any ideas that you might have. The idea here is to help people use their property, to help them use their travel trailers if they have them. We're not talking about people who are storing them because they take them down to Arizona. You store it next to your garage and it's stored.
actual use.
Right, we're not talking about issuing permits for that. But where's the line between, somebody using it as a dwelling when it shouldn't be? And somebody using it recreationally. We want to help people to, use their property. I don't want to prohibit the use of RVs and travel trailers. I just want to make sure that we're
And if I
not having,
remember correctly, or we talked about that you had to have a principal residence to do that.
quite
You couldn't do that on-
possibly.
You can't just pull one on vacant property, you have to have a principal residence and then you can use that.
Yep. And there's all of those things that we can do too. So think about it and please give us some feedback as far as.
So just to give you guys just a little snapshot of what you're gonna see at the next meeting. I'm taking this, Bethany had already talked about it, and this kind of covers the beginning part of the ordinance. And so what I'm gonna do is bring it back, and that's all in stricken. And this will all be underlined, and we're gonna drop it right in there. And then we're gonna go forward from that. There's a few things in there that we're gonna modify and tweak that still apply. But you get to a spot of where the commercial stuff hits, and we're not touching that. So that's just verbatim what you got today. So, and then you'll have at the very end, if this ordinance has the definitions at the beginning, and I don't like that. I like them at the end. I like them as an appendix. I don't think you should lead off with the definition, but I think you should lead off with the words. So I'll be getting the definitions modified and tweaked, and so you'll have a definition section completed that will define the terms that we need to do for this ordinance revision. Doesn't do it all. There still needs to be another definition review because you've got a lot of terms in your land use table that are not defined. They seem common language until somebody wants to sue. And then when you don't define it, then you get it. So that might be something to think about now.
When you've worked with other cities, have you had recommendations to planners like Bethany to put something together for council for review before approval? High level list of some of the major substantial changes or
No, absolutely. You don't want to, I don't want to run, because we've been thinking about this for I started back in May. We've been thinking about
Think
this
so.
for like 6-7 months.
Right.
And then we could just go give it to you guys. You're like, oh, that's too much. So yeah.
And that's my point.
We'll give you a summary. You'll get a summary.
right, just for the rest.
Yeah, because you're really relying on these guys to do the.
Well,
heavy
this guy right
lifting.
here his last session is in 2 weeks. I mean, he would understand. Just want to make sure the other
Yeah,
3 are
well,
gonna be able to as
that
well.
Absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is this something that you would like?
Well, that's why I just wanted to ask for his recommendation, if he had
Yeah,
any input on, if it is worthwhile. So
Yeah.
at least there's a little bit more, instead of just saying staff recommendation and approve it.
Yeah.
I'll say yay, probably give them a little bit of insight as to what's taking place before they just blindly sign off on it.
Very clear so that as a council, somebody called in. and said,
Right.
I can what? You could say, oh, yeah, my cheat notes here. I can, this is what we're doing. This is why.
And that's the
That's
same.
easier said than done sometimes, but
I know,
still.
I get it. I've never been in your shoes. I've never been the elected, so
Oh.
I don't get there.
That's also something that I want to put together for the public as well, is that
Yeah,
snapshot where
absolutely.
this is the portion that we have, this is the proposed changes,
Yeah,
Yep.
you know.
and this ordinance process takes time and we're all well invested in it. The leap from an ordinance to implementation of a new ordinance is bigger than you think. And
Yeah.
so I remember when we worked so hard in the county and we put that ordinance together and I was getting beat up by the newspaper and I was on radio and just beating the tar out of me. We got the thing approved, right? Got it all done. And I remember waking up at midnight going, I gotta actually do this now. What does that even look like? I mean, literally,
That's what she's thinking right now.
So, one thing that I would offer up, and it's up to you guys what you want to do, and it'll be up to the council, but, I would be willing to help bridge that gap with some, because an ordinance is only as good as it's administered. And so I would be willing to step in and help, because there should be policies and procedures, and there should be, fact sheets and all the sort of stuff that makes it easy for Beth to do that. And if it's something the city's interested in, I'd be more than willing to provide those services. And if you want to look at other parts of the ordinance down the road, like the definition section, I'd be happy to look at that too, and, see, figure that out a little bit, because I think it's a little, it defines things that really don't need defining, and then the things that need defining aren't in there. So I think there really needs to be a big analysis of the definitions, because if you don't define a term, somebody else will define it for you, and then you tend to get in trouble with that, so.
Okay.
Just to let you know, I'm already writing the fact sheets. So
Fair enough.
I can't wait for those fact sheets to get done.
And, from a shoreline standpoint, outside of definitions, that's it. Obviously you got the rest of your ordinance, PUD, so I can't make that any smaller, but that's it. It's pretty small. So there's not a whole lot you're gonna have to learn and figure out and read. You're gonna know right where it is. So, I think it's gonna be really beneficial. I think it'll make, Bethany's job easier. And, I think at the end of the day, once everybody gets, the contractor, developers, and everybody gets used to it, I think they're gonna be under, pretty knowledgeable understanding of what's expected to do work in the city as well. And that's what we just want. You just want transparency.
Right.
And you want to avoid the system of, well, I didn't know what I could do, so I just asked for forgiveness. You want to build, know what they do. They come in, they work with Bethany, who does a great job. They get the permits, it's done right. And the city grows in the manner that you want it to grow. I mean, that's the key comprehensive. So I've done some comp plan review, and a lot of this will dovetail in with parts of the comp plan that applied. So, trying to give you the full meal deal on this. So.
Sure.
You may have any questions for me, because I've got to be in Brainerd in 20 minutes to get my daughter to play.
Out of here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Chris.
very much,
Thank you.
Chris.
All right, we'll
Great
see you guys
job.
in January, huh?
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you.
This really has been a phenomenal process where
Educating process. for
it's
me.
gonna be so much better for the public, and it's gonna be so much better for you and the other administrators that are here, and it'll be better for us as well, because we got this place that we can go and find exactly what the letters of the ordinance is.
Guidelines for
Rather
variances.
than, it's gonna eliminating all this interpretation that was needed before.
Yeah, and the exciting thing for me is I love going out on a property and helping people develop their property. I love going out and saying, you're right, you can't do that, but here's what you can do. And kind of help them walk through that process and being able to say, you can do this and this and this. And it needs to be technical, and it needs to be precise, right?
Right.
Okay, well, you can do 15 feet of that historic ice ridge from here to here. Well, you can only move this amount of dirt. So you're going to have to figure out a way to manage that. Your beach can only go here. And with this ordinance, we have everything outlined. So it's just really, really great.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, I can say from a salt standpoint, this is the process. I mean, you guys are doing exactly what you should do. From my standpoint, I just show once a month, and what I did right, I go back and do it. So this process really was the model.
Is this thing gonna get excuse me, is this gonna get bogged down after the first year? We get into February, March, April, and you have public gets involved and the council's involved then at that point. And is this thing gonna just, is it,
We're
is
hoping
there a
to have-
chance it'll just kind of won't go anywhere because of discussions that are going on between the public and?
Well, in fruitful discussions, we absolutely, we want to encourage that. So that's why our goal for January's meeting is to encourage
I
that.
understand that.
I would hope that we can have it to the city council in February for the final approval.
That should be a goal.
That is, yeah, and my goal is to, like I said, is to just pinpoint, this is what we're changing, this is why. Let's have a discussion, but ultimately then you recommend it and then we adopt
That's
it.
end of February.
Mhm.
Spring design drawings will be underway already.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
no.
no,
Right.
Yep.
I think, one, I think I'm pretty good balance between, I can use my property, but I have to do things for the law. I think everybody finds that pretty.
Mhm.
I don't think you see a lot of opposition to it.
Yep.
But it's just heal the education.
Yeah. We have, yep, and we have a great opportunity with the spring Lake Association gathering that I've put together in May. I'm hoping that most contractors in the area are very familiar with these shoreline rules. It's a lot like this in other municipalities in the county. So a lot of the contractors that come in with their drawings, they're going to be very well versed in all of this. But for the property owners and getting all of that information to all the lake associations, I think that will be the best way to get it spread out to everybody, saying, here's what you can do. You own property on a lake. Let's discuss this. Here's the changes and here's what you can do.
Yep.
Good, because I was hoping to. Have a good night, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a hard hat for all these site visits you're gonna be making?
I'm actually quite used to that, so
Fair enough.
it's everything that we're proposing and any procedure that is required, I've done before.
Yep.
So I'm not anticipating. I mean, it's a busy season regardless, but these are site visits that you should be going out. The SRAM doesn't increase the site visits. You're already there. It's just it's a 10-minute procedure while you're out there. So.
Yep.
I want you to be very quiet or very cautious and very careful. Because if something happens to Bethany at this point,
It's
we're gonna be in trouble.
You know what, we're not, because I've got plans, I've got long 5-year goals. And then on top of it, I have the desire that if anybody stepped in, if we ended up with a situation where we had to adopt the Minnesota building codes and we hired somebody, is that we can seamlessly, that we have things in place where it's not this trying to just figure out what the right rule is. I mean, my goal is to make sure that's clearly spelled out, and so that.
Okay, city planner report.
It's pretty quiet these days. We just have like 9 or 10 permits that I've approved in the last month. We still have a vacancy on the planning commission, so if anybody knows anybody, please speak up.
I'll have another recommendation probably in 6 months.
Okay,
This gentleman will be moving here,
okay,
highly qualified.
excellent,
We actually have
excellent.
two spots, right?
Yes, well, yes, we will.
Why is that now? Because of Dawn?
Well, no,
Pro tem.
you're going to be the liaison for the planning commission, is my understanding. But I'm assuming John Taylor will be. He has indicated that he does not want to be.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm already assuming that that's,
and you prepared the 4-year contracts to lock these guys down, right? Yeah.
We need to.
Yeah.
We
And Gary
definitely
looks
need
down.
to. Yes, please don't look down, Gary.
well, we're first year into the 3, I think, isn't it?
I think
Aren't these, didn't I just start my 3rd
I think so.
or 3 years
I think so. I think,
last year?
Josh, are you up this January?
I don't know.
For chair?
Yeah,
No, I think we just nominated you
last year. I think.
November, December. Yeah, a year ago.
Yeah, I think so.
It's every 2 years, yeah.
I'll have to
Sure.
look into it. I will look into it. But I'd also like to just state, and I know Don isn't here, but on behalf of the city of Nisswa, I would just like to thank Don for the knowledge, the time and the dedication that he has given to the city council and the planning commission through these many years, and we wish him well.
Yes,
He will
that's
be
a
missed.
good thing put on the record.
Yes.
Any additional comments, questions?
I'm all out of breath.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second. All those in
Second.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.